This spring anime season that's passed, there's been a lot of talk of a certain show called Redo of a Healer. Mostly negative things, and after checking it out, I can definitely understand why people are so negative towards it. Not just because of the depiction of sexual violence and how it paints it, but just because it's a pretty poorly written story on top of that. But it did make me think about something. It made me think about So Bad It's Good anime, as well as how people would react if some of these older shows or movies that fit into this category were to be released today. So today I want to talk to you guys about So Bad It's Good type of media, what it is, as well as what the appeal of these shows are. So strap yourselves in, because we're going to be looking at some strange stuff today. So to start off, we need to figure out what it means for a show to be so bad it's good. It's not always an easy thing to pin down, since the term itself is very subjective. Some people find enjoyment in a story or show being poorly executed, while others just find it bad. Meanwhile, others find more weird and unconventional shows to fit the term a lot better. But for the sake of this, we're gonna say that a So Bad It's Good show is a show that is not conventionally good, but entertaining. Meaning that while the story might have huge plot holes or other factors that prevents it from being conventionally good, it still comes off as entertaining. It's by no means a perfect definition, as it is still very subjective, but I don't think we're gonna get around that. So let me give you an example. Like I said earlier, the show that made me think about this was Redo of a Healer. Now, that is a show that I would just classify as bad, because I don't think it even does a very good job at being entertaining, even in a dumb way. But I do think it's quite clear that it is going for that so bad it's good appeal. It's just too good at making you hate everything about its unlikable cast of characters and generic power fantasy plot. No, what I would say is a better example of a show that is so bad it's good would be the 2018 show Killing Bites. This show takes the idea of humans that possess the ability to transform themselves into animals and puts them up against each other in a battle to the death style tournament. It's dumb as all hell, but it knows it, and instead focuses on keeping the viewer entertained through the sheer stupidity of it all. And for a less violent example, you have the 2014 series Rail Wars. This show is set in a world where the government is still in control of the railways, and you have students who are entering a training program for people who want to work for the Japan National Railways. And while they are in this training program, they end up having to go through everything from working security to dealing with bomb threats and extremists who wants to privatize the railways. The show is stupid and it knows it, so it uses that to its benefit to put the characters in very over-dramatized situations that are equal parts dumb and entertaining. And that is what makes these shows so bad it's good to me. So what is the appeal of shows that are so bad it's good? For me, I've always been a fan of shit-watching. Putting on a show or movie that you know will be bad, just so that you can laugh at it, especially if you're watching it together with friends, is a really fun experience. For me, this is the biggest appeal of these shows. It's a different form of enjoyment that you only get from these types of shows who try to go all out on their idea, even if it ends up not working at all. I also find that those series help me appreciate the better shows out there a lot more. Just watching classics or media that are otherwise generally recognized as great all the time just gets boring to me. I need something dumb from time to time that tries something a little bit outside of the norm, even if it does end up falling flat on its face in the process. Two good examples of this in my opinion are Genocyber and iCity. Genocyber is first and foremost a show known for its excessive violence and gore, but under that is a somewhat cool looking cyberpunk world, with the Genocyber being a cool idea of a mix of cybernetics and psychic power. Ultimately, it ends up failing because it isn't really able to do more with that than being a showcase of excessive gore and some slightly traumatizing scenes of brutality. If you've seen it, you know which scenes I'm talking about. But it's still enjoyable in its own messed up way. iCity is much of the same, though in this case, the end result is even more stupid. iCity uses a lot of psychic power and Esper cliches, and couples it with a messy plot that seems to have somewhat been an inspiration for the Index series plot about the race of making the first Esper who can reach level 6. But ultimately in iCity, everything just kind of falls apart and leaves on an ending that makes very little sense and just feels confusing. It's a fun movie for sure, but its flaws are glaring. Sometimes though, a show can also be saved by going the so bad it's good route. A great example of this is Ghost Stories. I'm sure you've all heard about this show at this point, but it's no over-exaggeration to say that this show is infamous to us in the West because of its hilarious dub. Being very much a product of its time, the the Ghost Stories dub is basically nothing but pop culture references, jokes about the show's animation, or just jokes about common anime tropes, as well as some very inappropriate jokes that definitely wouldn't fly today.
No, that picture. When I volunteered at the wonderful Exodus homosexual conversion camp, I met this woman who was there who looked a lot like that woman.
But this approach definitely saved the shows in some ways, as the original and more faithful version that was first made for Western release didn't do very well at all. But now, with this new approach to dubbing the series, it rose to cult status, and will always be remembered as an officially released abridged series. Not because it's the only anime to have been given a very weird and intentionally or unintentionally funny dub, but simply because it stands out. One of the questions I had to ask myself while making this video was, does it have to be violent to be considered so bad it's good? And the answer to that is of course no. But excessive gore and violence is a pretty common factor when it comes to a lot of these shows that fits this bill. Especially when we're looking at shows from the 80s and 90s. Probably the most blatant example of this in my opinion is the Violence Jack OVAs, based on the Go Nagai manga of the same name, and in particular the second OVA called Evil Town from 1988, which was directed by Ichiro Itano. This to me is not just an example of these types of gory, so bad it's good type of stories that were popular in OVAs at the time. It's actually even one of the few OVAs that has taken the violence to such an extreme that even I had trouble watching it. And that doesn't happen often. The funny thing as well, with that OVA, is that if you go and compare it to the same arc in the original manga by Go Nagai, you will see that they seriously toned up the violence for the anime. But no, this OVA is also an example of a show that lets the violence get so bad that I was unable to enjoy myself, and that kinda defeats the point. But of course, violence and gore is only one factor, and it doesn't make a show so bad it's good. You also have examples of shows that have some cartoony violence without the gore, like Chargeman Ken from the 70s. Sure, it's got some messed up scenes for a kids show, but it's not very violent by adult standards. Minus that one scene where the guy kills himself. But no, the show is a cult classic, and I would even say it's so bad it's good because of how endearing it is. The short episodes, stupid situations, unintentionally funny good versus evil plot, if you can even call it that, and poor production is what makes that show, in my opinion. When they finally started being able to put background music and sound effects in the episode, I was way more excited for that than I ever should have been. You also have shows that go for the more titillating approach. The 2016 anime Keijo, with 8 exclamation marks because that's important, rose to the occasion and literally thrust its butts in our face. Because having a bunch of girls play a made-up sport that involves smashing their behinds together in order to knock their opponents off the land and into the pool turned out to be the sports anime that I never knew I needed. Then throw in some special powers and pointless references to other works, and you have a perfect example of a so bad it's good anime. Sadly, the manga was cancelled. Alright, so while this channel is mostly focused on anime, I do also want to talk a little bit about other forms of so bad it's good media as well. Because obviously, it's not just anime that has this potential. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the manga Satanophany. Just the name itself screams so bad it's good, and the moment I found it, I knew I had to check it out. So Satanophany tells the story of a high school girl named Chika Amagi, a rich girl who one day goes out with her friends to have fun. They end up joining some older guys for some fun at a club and some underage drinking. Heading back, they end up stopping by an apartment because her friends are blackout drunk. But it turns out that they're just pretending, and were paid by the older guys to lure Chika out so that they can have their way with her. But in a moment of panic, Chika ends up killing all of them. It's all caught on camera, and she ends up going to jail. But not just any jail. She has been sentenced to serve time in Haguro Prison, a prison that only takes in special criminals, as well as people who are infected with the Medusa syndrome that turns people into homicidal murderers. While there, she ends up meeting other girls who also have the Medusa syndrome. But they don't seem that scary. That is until, despite being warned about leaving her cell at night, she ends up running into one of the other girls, but she seems completely different and ends up strangling Chika. Chika wakes up in a medical ward where she is told that she tried to hang herself, but obviously that's not the truth. The real truth is that the head warden of this prison is using these girls for some messed up experiments. He is having the girls conduct murder experiments in which their animal instincts take over and they act based on their murder model or basis, which are traits from world-famous serial killers such as Henry Lee Lucas, Albert Fish, aka the Boogeyman, Albert DeSalvo, aka the Boston Strangler, or Joseph Mengele, aka the Angel of Death. This last piece of information is honestly what drew me to this manga in the first place. Sure, the manga is mostly smut and gore, as expected, but the idea of a story focused on people who are being experimented on and having DNA of serial killers implanted into them that changes them into some seriously disturbed monsters sounds like a really cool concept to me. I would love to see someone else take a stab at something like this, as well as maybe try to make something out of it that isn't just so bad it's good, but actually just good. Another example of so bad it's good media is the game series Chou Aniki. This side-scrolling shoot-em-up is a very wacky game that uses surreal imagery and, most importantly, homoerotic overtones. I mean, just look at some of these enemies. This game sure is something else. The series first started on the PC Engine back in 1992 and had its last release with Chou Aniki 0 in 2009, which is also only the second Chou Aniki game to be released outside of Japan. Of course, because of that, it's virtually unknown outside of Japan. Chou Aniki is what the Japanese refers to as a kusoge, which literally just translates to shit game. But unlike what the term might sound like, it doesn't always mean that the game itself is always complete trash. It can also refer to games with frustrating gameplay or other things that annoy the player. Even a kusoge can be fun in its own way, even if it is broken or has frustrating gameplay. Now, I will be the first to admit that I've never played any of these Chou Aniki games, as they don't really seem like my cup of tea, but I did watch some VTubers play it, and I can definitely say that I see the appeal of them. The game just seems so wacky and dumb that it's hard not to be amused by all the dumb-looking enemies and men's beams being fired off. It just nails that trashy game aesthetic that makes you just want to keep playing, or in my case, keep watching. Plus, the frustrating and difficult gameplay makes it appealing to those gamers looking for a challenge. So by now you've probably asked yourself the same question a few times. Sure, this is all well and good, but what's the actual point of all this? And the answer is honestly nothing. I just wanted an excuse to talk about some anime that I don't have enough to say about to dedicate an entire video to. So instead, I figured I'd talk about shit watching, and why I like watching bad shows. It's just a lot of fun for me to watch ideas and concepts that are being stretched way beyond its logical conclusion, even if it ends up as a bad piece of media. I honestly think that bad shows are worth a watch. It makes me appreciate the good shows a whole lot more, especially when you're like me and you watch a lot anyways. Just watching the same shows play out in very similar ways, even though they might be well constructed narratively, gets tiresome after a while. I need something more bonkers. Something that isn't afraid of tripping over itself and messing up. I need my so bad it's good shows from time to time. Of course, there are shows that are just bad and not fun to watch as well. I'm looking at you, handshakers. But I find that as I've been watching more anime, I have also gotten better at differentiating so bad it's good anime from just bad anime. Bad anime tries to follow something popular and it's just bad at it. So bad it's good anime, on the other hand, is often trying to do something a little out of the norm and isn't afraid of being a bit controversial along the way as well. But that's not a perfect way to find these shows, and sometimes shows are just plain bad. Basically, bad shows are bad, but so bad it's good shows are bad in a fun way that makes it more enjoyable and entertaining. And I like being entertained. Alright, I think that's enough for now. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, then don't forget to check out some other videos of mine, and subscribe if you want more. Peace.